Yes, good evening, dear students. Once again, I am in front of you to share my views and experiences about a topic I have done today. And today's topic is very much familiar to all of you, which is an introduction to Indian writing in English. When I use the word Indian, I feel very happy and contented. You will ask me, sir, why do you feel happy and contented? Yes, the reason is that I am going to discuss a literature that deals with Indian experiences, Indian thoughts, and Indian vision. We Indians are in no way inferior to our other counterparts as far as literary vision is concerned, literary thought is concerned. And in some of the cases, I think that Indian writing English has far surpassed its other counterparts. Now, once again, I must tell you that literature comes into existence out of a conflict. It is a product of three factors, as the French critic Taine says: moment, milieu, and race. Three things combine to make a literature. So, what made Indians contribute to the realm of literature? What was their experiences that they wanted to share with the countrymen? That is very important to know, and we shall know this by and by. You know that literature that was produced in India, if we want to study and analyze, must be divided into two periods: pre-independence period and post-independence period. Yet, I must remind you that there is no watertight compartment as far as literary experiences are concerned. That is to say, one experience is bound to sneak into another period and vice versa. So, first of all, I would like to remind you to go back to the pre independence period, the period during which India was a country that was ruled by an alien rulers, by a foreign ruler. India was a colony of the British empires. The Britishers were ruling over this country, and writing literature under that colonial experience must have been a very, very difficult and different experience. We must go back to the Bengali literature first. That how in India we have Bengali literature where a galaxy of intellectuals, a galaxy of writers emerged in the wave of the colonial rule, and when they started writing, their writings were quite valuable. They used to pinpoint the Indian experiences during the colonial rule. If we look back at the Bengali literature, we have a number of names to give, and we will do well to enumerate some of the names from Bengal. The list is endless, but to name a few, I must tell you, they are Henry Vivian Louis Desrosiers, Taru Dutt, Michael Madhusudhan Dutt, Sarojini Naidu, Rabindranath Tagore, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Swami Vivekanand. So many others are also there whose name can be enumerated. And among them, if we analyze HLV Derozio, a very dynamic and young man of his time who was very much intellectual, and he was a nationalist to the core. He was the young professor of English at the Calcutta Presidency College, and with his lecture, he wanted to arouse nationalistic and revolutionary feelings among his students. He wanted that every individual must utilize their mind to think for themselves. There should not be a mental slavery. Nobody can make you a slave because you have the treasure, you have the precious treasure of mind with the use of which you can think properly and you can execute appropriately. This young man from Bengal had revolutionized the thoughts and views of his students, whose influence was far reaching. But then, this young man, as usual, we know that if some revolutionary mind comes into play in the colonial rule, this is always suppressed, this is always tried to hush up. So he started to be looked at with an eye of threat that, oh, if he tries to convert so many people to his views, to his opinions, then the situation will be different. So he was not allowed to engage classes in that college, but he had the capacity to keep arousing the national consciousness among his students and his followers through his literature that he has written. Though he was a precocious child, a child who is a gifted child, a child who has developed certain traits, certain intellectual fabrics well before his age, and such men are not born always on the land of the earth, on the motherland. And his poem, The Harp of India, is very, very essential for all students of poetry, for all students of Indian English poetry to know. And that poetry, that piece of poetry, laments the lost glory of the country, and at the same time he is remembering that there was a time when the country used to be a glorious country. It used to be a country that had its own favor, that had its own independence, and now this country has lost much of its glory. So he exhorts human beings through that poem to work hard to salvage the nation's pride, salvage and save the nation's integrity. So we see that a wave of nationalism, a wave of revolution, a strain of social consciousness was taking place side by side in the writings of these writers, and we know that this social consciousness was targeted to a particular audience who were not realizing that they were the proud inheritors of this wealth of the country, and they must just try to uh, awaken themselves, awaken their inner conscience to salvage the wealth and pride of the country which is going in alien rulers' hands. So, in this wake of the social consciousness, we also learned that we had Rabindranath Tagore, a very, very original poet. He was not only a poet, he was a painter, philosopher, thinker, actor, dramatist, novelist, and what not. He was such a genius. He was such a man who had combined within himself divergent sorts of experiences, and he was, in true sense of the word, a Gurudev. He really deserved the title of Gurudev, and his love for life, his love for nature, his love for human beings, they are marvelous. And if you read his poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear, that itself shows him, that itself showcases him what Rabindranath Tagore is. I think that today every sincere student of poetry has remembered that poem. Even the school children remember this nationalistic poem, and this poem not only captures the poetic experience of the poet, rather, it is also arousing someone to be independent of everything. I would like to recite to you some of the lines or almost all lines of the poem. Let us see to what extent my mind serves to recall those lines of the poem I quote. And the title is Where the Mind is Without Fear. So, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where the tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habits, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country awake. Well, this poem is well constructed, and one of the qualities of the poem is that it can be committed to memory with a little bit of effort. This poem, if we analyze in its totality, is an expression of the poet's feeling towards the nation. He has a dream, he has a vision of an ideal India, of an ideal country, that this country is rich in culture and civilization. This country has the capacity to teach the entire world the lessons of universal brotherhood, the lessons of fellow feeling, the lessons of living with amicability, and this is the country where people of different linguistic, religious, and ethical backgrounds reside. But there is also an undercurrent of protest in the poem, and the registering of the protest is that this country has been divided in the name of, or in the petty issues of, caste, creed, color, religion, sect, and other considerations of birth and regionalism. No, we may be of different colors, we may be of different linguistic backgrounds, we may be of different food habits, we may be of different cloth habits, we may be celebrating different festivals, regional festivals, still we belong to this one Mother Earth, and so any kind of discrimination or any kind of ill will towards one another is not a safe guide. So he tells us to be very much conscious that we are the children of the same earth and the same soil, and the Almighty God may give us conscience and confidence that we should not be divided among ourselves, because united we stand, divided we fall. If we remain united, no power, no external power can break us apart. If we are not united among ourselves, even a small wind comes and we are buffeted to different directions. You must have listened during your childhood, the story of matchsticks. That how when all the matchsticks are taken together, and if you are told to break that matchstick, you will not be able to break those collections of matchsticks because they are united. And if I give you a single piece of matchstick, you will quickly break it apart. So the same applies to this nation and its people. Tagore was a great writer. He was a dramatist. He was a painter, no doubt. And his experiences of life, his love of nature, his entire human concerns have been reflected in his collection of songs that he wrote in Bengali language originally, is perhaps Gitanjali, that is the poem Gitanjali, whose meaning is the homage through song. Gitanjali, homage through songs. And this was originally written in Bengali language, but it was translated into English later on by W.B. Yeats, and this work was very original, and because of this work he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913. So this Gitanjali, or you can say a Garden of Roses, is a collection of poems, and they tell about his experiences, his love of nature. And W.B. Yeats, an English poet, a poet from English literature, originally belonging to Ireland, has written a preface to it, an introduction to it. And in his introduction to this translation of the Gitanjali, he has praised all the qualities of a man in Rabindranath Tagore, and that collection of poems is very essential as far as Indian experience is concerned, as far as Indian writing in English is concerned. And I remember to have read a poem during my student life. The title of the poem is Silent Steps. This poem is the poet's deep conviction that God is immanent in each and every particle of the earth, every time, every moment, but we are not able to feel this. Only the seeing eyes, only the retentive memories, only the feeling heart can have the experiences of the presence of God, because you have to reach yourself to that level. You must have the stature. If you want to have a spiritual experience, you must have reached yourself to that stature that tells you that yes, God is here. Says, have you not heard his silent steps? He comes, ever comes. What does it mean? That God does not appear before you in physical form. We realize the presence of God through the objects of nature. Whenever we are passing through experience after experience, the change of one mood into another mood, the change of the mood of happiness into anger, and the change of mood from anger or unhappiness into happiness is also an experience that God is there. When we are passing through a period of crisis, a period of disillusionment, we remember the Almighty God. And we do not remember or realize that when we have come out of that trouble, who was it that removed the problem, that removed the sorrow from your heart within minutes? It was only He and He alone who came and removed your problem. So that sort of affinity has to be developed between the devotees and the Almighty. Though the blessings of the Almighty God upon human beings are immense, you must have read the metaphysical poetry, and metaphysical poetry is also talking about the unworldly things. One of the metaphysical poets, if you remember, is George Herbert, and in his poem The Gifts of God, he has enumerated God's blessing after blessing to human beings, and he has also pointed out how God has deliberately kept rest to him so that a mutual connection is maintained, so that the connection between the creator and the creation is maintained, because both should losers be. Yet let him keep the rest, but keep them with refining restlessness. If goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. What? There was a planned, reason in God's retention of the rest with him, because it is a pulley machine. That if you feel in a troubled situation, you are directly moved to him, and he is merciful, he is kind, he is benevolent, he is lovable, and he is universal troubleshooter. So he shoots your troubles, he forgives all your mistakes, he forgives everything that you have done, and he removes your problems. So Tagore is a great writer, a dramatist. His play Kura is very important. It is also an Indian experience in dramatic form. Now, you must also know that during British periods, our country was also having lots of men from the West, because it was the rule of the Britishers. And a number of British intellectuals, a number of Western Orientalists were also there in India, and they were also men of courage and conviction. They also wanted to improve the condition of the country with their rule. So normally we do not know, if we have less knowledge, we say that the Britishers just belayed our country white. The Britishers looted everything from the land of the country. No, The role and contribution of the Britishers to the making of the modern India is also immense. We do not be biased. And two names I would like to enumerate: Sir William Jones and Macaulay. They were also great educationists. Macaulay has the capacity for advocating English education in India. Jones is also a highly scholarly person, a person who has read so many books, and his religious experience was very much important for all of us, and they contributed a lot to the making of the country. And Macaulay was an educationist. He wanted to chalk out a plan for the teaching of English in this country, because English is a language not only of the English, it is a language for all practical purposes. So, every countryman should read the language for the sake of a striking relationship, camaraderie among ourselves. And it is very important to understand that the Britishers also wanted that education should spread from one to another, and they were also pained to see the condition of the poor, the oppressed, the uneducated, the illiterate in the country, because until and unless we educate ourselves, all the problems that crop up remain the same. They cannot be solved. So, education is a weapon with the help of which we can solve all the personal and social problems. We develop an insight into things, and education does not change our mind, it also changes our ways of living. Poverty is a different thing. Poverty has always been there in our country or in any other country as well. But poverty has nothing to do with your way of living. You should not be wayward. You should not be dirty. You should not be uncultured, uncivilized. You can eat one less bread, but you cannot wear uncultured dress. You cannot wear dirty clothes. If you have one set of cloth, you wash it, you iron it, then you wear it. You cannot just complain that I am poor, so I am living in a filthy condition. So the purpose of literature is also to create awareness among human beings, to create education among human beings, to understand all these things. And education plays a great role in any human civilization. So, with a view to this, three universities were established in India by the Britishers. They were Calcutta University, Madras University, and Bombay University. This was a great step, or this was a great initiative towards the direction of education in India. And there were also great writers who were thinking about social concerns, like the architect of modern India, Raja Ram Mohan Rai. And Raja Ram Mohan Rai was a social revolutionary, and he did a lot of things to revolutionize the thoughts and views of people. And the credit of being the a man of modern Rinasha goes to in this person. And Rajaram Mohan Rai worked a lot in the interests of human beings with the establishment of different social organizations that catered to the needs of the poor and the oppressed. And he was not a very bigot kind of man, or there was not a feeling of prejudice or bias in him as far as the society is concerned, the language is concerned. He very vociferously advocated the teaching of English in India, and the result is that he became a great social thinker of his time. He also loved other languages like Sanskrit, Hindi, Bengali, but his concern was also towards the development of this alien language, which is very much capable of expressing our ideas and feelings succinctly. So he had a great role to play. And Swami Vivekanand, as the name itself goes, is a Swami, is a saint, seer, and a man of strong mental fiber. He was. Arise, awake, stop not till the goal is reached. He had lots of experiences and knowledge of the Indian myths and legends and culture. And by the way, I would like to name our Indian literature also that was very much available before everyone, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and the Gita and other religious verses, or the Vedas, the four Vedas that we have. So they were the pearls of wisdom. We Indians did not have very poor literature. From times immemorial, our mains and saints and seers had lots of information, lots of spiritual experiences to share. And we cannot ignore today the roles and contribution of the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Vedas and the Purans. They are the pearls of wisdom. It is another thing that today we have strayed from our culture and civilization, but this was the country which has everything to give to people of other countries. We have ancient universities, Nalanda and Takshila, which were the disseminators of world knowledge. People from other countries, people from other places used to travel to India, used to spend their maximum amount of student period, and they would go back with pearls of ancient wisdom, and that was sufficient for them to spend their life in a very fruitful manner. Because once you understand what life actually is, you do not have to worry much to staircase your ways through thick and thin. So what does Indian experience, what does Indian literature teach you? It teaches you the art of living, how you live over a period of time. A writer gathers the experiences, and that literature is a product of the experiences. So ancient literatures are pearls of wisdom which every student of literature, irrespective of the discipline he has opted, should read or understand. So Vivekanand was a great writer, and his work is immense. He traveled to America, he traveled to Chicago, and his speech that he delivered in the World Parliament of Religions in 1893 was very historic. And if you remember, the introduction to the speech, that was the beginning of the speech address, was very much good. And he says, "Sisters and brothers of America." Hardly had he stopped speaking when the audience from the gallery were in a mood of thrill, were in a mood of happiness. Oh, a man from is using such a modest language. And during that contemporary period, all the newspapers that were to report this event the following day were writing the name of this man in golden letters. The Deccan Herald, the newspaper, wrote in very glorious and glowing terms the speech that he had delivered. So that was a an experience that the Americans had of a man from East. So at that time also, a man from East was going and he was proving his mettle and he was trying to influence people of other country. So we cannot underestimate the contribution of Swami Vivekananda to the making of modern literature also. If you are talking about Sri Aurobindo, a man who was spiritually awakened, a man who was very great in all the spheres of his life, essentially he was a saint. And Aurobindo is a voluminous writer. It is very difficult to read all his literature. His Savitri itself is a bulky poem, and that Savitri is the experience of an Indian woman in different circumstances. Aurobindo was spiritually alive and he used to practice yoga and meditation and all the avenues to bring poise of mind and heart. And the future poetry is a great contribution to the world of Indian writing in English. In his future poetry, he has spoken in glorious terms about the future of poetry. And he says that when every other help will fail, it is poetry that will console you, that will sustain you. The civilization may undergo sea changes, but the human experience, the core human experience, has remained the same. And when every help has failed, people will turn to poetry to derive sustenance. He voices Matthew Arnold also, who is a great advocate of culture and civilization. That Matthew Arnold has said that the purpose of literature is to propagate the best that has been thought and known. It is a collection of the accumulated wisdom of the past. The same thing has been voiced by T.S. Eliot, that tradition is a matter of much wider significance, and anyone who wants to have traditional knowledge or the knowledge of the tradition must first develop historical consciousness. A mind who has developed historical consciousness will be capable of understanding what his tradition was. You cannot just overlook the great importance that tradition has to play in the present time also. Because when a writer is writing in the present time, he is what his ancestors were. He is also voicing the concerns of his ancestors, but at the same time, he is also trying to voice his individual concerns. And that is the essence of his essay, tradition and the individual talent. So, these writers from pre-independence period had already paved the way for the future writers to follow, because We must have someone in our past to derive something from. This does a great thing for all of us. And thereafter, a wave of writers, a galaxy of writers started writing in different directions. If you see all those writers of Indian writing in English in different genres, from poetry to fiction to drama to short stories to essay, after independence, the list is endless. You do well to enumerate some of the writers of Indian writing in English in the post independence era. They are great in number. And Nayantara Shagal, Jhumpa Lahiri, Shobha De, Amitav Ghosh, Salman Rushdie, V.S. Naipaul, Shashi Tharoor, Deepak Chopra, Shobha De, Anita Desai, Kiran Desai. So many names are there. If you look at drama also, you can say Mahesh Alkanchwar, Mahesh Dattani, Vijay Tendulkar, Girish Karnad, okay, P. Lal, Kikian Daruwala, Nissim Ezekiel, Toru. So many names are there, and they have done great contribution to the field of English literature. And the trio of Indian English novel writings is known to all. They are Anand Rao and Narayan. Anand is a man of social consciousness, Roy is a man of philosophical bent of mind, and Narayan has tried to depict his ideas of the Malgudi town. His novels are set in Malgudi towns, a regional town in the Madras, a fictional town in Madras, and we will do well to read some of the important novels of these three writers. If you try to enumerate the novels of Anand, so two novels are very important, which every student of literature should know. They are Untouchable and Coolie. If you name just Rao, that is Radha Rao, his novel Kantapura, The Serpent and the Rope, is very important, and the guide of and the English teacher of R.K. Narayan are very important. They must be taken into consideration. But apart from that, after the 30s, a number of writers just tried to devise different themes and techniques. We have Amitav Ghosh and Salman Rushdie and other writers who were regarded to be the post-colonial writers of Indian writing in English. They had different experiences to share. If you are talking about Amitav Ghosh, he is a man of historical consciousness, a man who has developed interest in social anthropology, and he has brought to bear into the fabric of his fiction history and anthropology as well. And if you are trying to see Salman Rushdie, he is a very novelist of dystopian nature, as well as his novels are regarded to be a magic realism, much in the footsteps of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. That is a combination of magic and realism, that reality is produced in a magical way to entertain and amuse a section of readers. And if you are talking about mm, partition novel, partition novels used to chart a different terrain of the partition experiences. We have partition novels of Amitabh Ghosh, The Shadow Lines, Train to Pakistan by Khushwant Singh, Chaman Nahal's Azadi, Bapsi Sidhwa, Ice Candy Man, and these partition novels were very well treated because they explored the despair and disillusionment of people in the wake of partition. Partition was a very very nightmarish experiences for all the people. And you know that during that wave of partition, people in thousands and thousand numbers from both sides lost their lives. You know that several girls and women were oppressed and raped and butchered, and there was a situation where your mind will boggle. And this partition was a very dirty experience and a dirty trick as well, as some writers have pointed that what is the use of just dividing the country in the name of a religion. That shows that yes, there is a division in human nature also. So in literary art, we see that writers voice their concern, the experiences of those people of that time. And Amitabh Ghoshal's Shadow Lines has very well explored through his characters that how partition has created a mental stress or a emotional torture in the sufferers, that this is a kind of shadow lines. And if this partition keeps on increasing, then we normally do not feel happy or healthy in a particular land, because if we are going to another place, and I'm not sure that tomorrow they may draw another line somewhere. So this country which we are living in is divided into other countries. And how on earth does it feel that today you belong to this country and tomorrow you belong to that country, and till yesterday you did not need passport to go to that country, and today you need to undergo all the rigmarole of official process of passports to go to that place which earlier used to have yours. So this has been explored by Amitav Ghosh in his novel The Shadow Lines, and that experience is very very heartbreaking for all of us. So a number of writers are there to enumerate, but we won't have time in this small span of the video to tell. I'd like you to tell that you read the history of Indian writing in English, and there are good books on Indian writing in English, but KRS Anger's Indian writing in English is very important. That must be studied by every student of literature. And in that book, Iyengar has very well researched the origin of the history of English literature, right from early days to the contemporary time. And every writer has been given sufficient space which is enough for us to at least demarcate the individuality and uniqueness of that writer. So I request you that you read that book and try at least primarily to enumerate the names of the writer. You should also try to make a distinction between two writers as far as their literary technique is concerned, as far as their literary art is concerned. And you must know the history also, because history forms a backdrop around which literatures weave their tapestry and art of literature. So dear students, I won't have much time in this space of the video to go ahead, because the space is very limited. But I was just thinking of introducing yourself, rather inducting yourself to a course of studies, that is Indian writing in English, and you must tell yourself that it is your literature. It is as much yours as the English literature was the English's. And Indian experience is very much there. If you, by the way, read the poem The Night of the Scorpion by Nissim Ezekiel, you will know the love and the feeling of Indian mothers. Indian mothers are really marvelous. They are ready to bear problems for the sake of their children. And that poem is very important to read. You should also read another poem by another writers. You should also read Songs of Radha by Toru Dutt, um, um, perhaps Sarojini Naidu's songs of Radha, and other poems can also be taken by you. And Amitabh Ghosh's fictional art, you should also know. Some of the non-fictional essays of non-fictional prose of Amitabh Ghosh you should also study, because time does not permit me to go ahead with that. But you remember that it is your literature, and the novels of Indian writing in English portray very your literature. You feel that that a character is speaking, you are speaking, and as far as language is concerned, it is not the English from England, it is Indian English, because the writers try deliberately to use English from your place, from your language. Some of the regional words are also incorporated to corroborate and to make Indian writing originally Indian. You will find Hindi words, you will find Malayali words, you will find native Bhojpuri words also in Indian writing in English. It doesn't mean that the writers do not have the supply of sufficient number of words in English. No, the writers do have lots of words in English, but there are some words, there are some expressions, sorry, which do not need to be expressed in English language also, which cry for the original language. Oh, these are the things. So, if you come across the use of the native words into the area of Indian writing in English, you do not have a negative impact, rather, you embrace it, you welcome it. Today, we have lots of literature, regional literature also. We have Bhojpuri literature, we have Marathi literature, we have Urian literature, we have Rajasthan literature, so many literatures are there, Bengali literature, you know, that Anita Desai, feminist right. Lots of things to say, but time doesn't permit. And I leave you with a promise that I will come with another topic of mine on another topic when it materializes. Till then, you stay safe, stay at home, take care of yourself. Good night. Bye bye.